Yo, Kogency Reacts channel. I just reacted to like 2 hours worth of content with no mic. My mic wasn't plugged in, and I didn't see it. I didn't check. I didn't do my level. Cause usually my mic's always plugged in, so I don't need to check my levels or check anything. Yeah. So I'm sorry if my reaction's not as enthusiastic with this. I reacted to this 2 hours ago, and now uploading them, I realized it had no sound. So yeah, I love you guys. So please, for me, can you like this video, please? Cause I'm doing this over. Please, can you like this video for me, please? Can you comment what else you'd want to see me react to, and subscribe as well? You know what I'm saying? Please subscribe, please, please, please. Cause this is taking a lot of my brain, honestly. Now I have to react to all of this again. Oh my god.
The story begins in the late 1980s, when Scotland Yard realised that they were facing a new threat. Jamaican gangsters known as Yardies were moving into London, pumping huge quantities of crack cocaine onto the streets and using violence in a routine, almost casual way, shooting and kidnapping and torturing those who stood in their way. And unlike the more familiar mafias, the Yardies had no formal structure, which made it much more difficult to find out what they were doing. It was a new problem, but Scotland Yard fell back on an old solution: informers.
Yardie is a term often used particularly within the Caribbean, expatriate and Jamaican diaspora to refer to people of Jamaican origin, though its exact meaning changes depending on context. The term is derived from the Jamaican patois for home or yard. The term may have specifically originated from crowded government yards of two-story government-funded concrete homes found in Kingston. And
Bro, I fully had my flag tied around my neck. Bro, I was so excited for this video, bro. I had my flag, I was waving it. I say, yeah, Yardie, Ray, yeah, Yardie. Bumbuckler video and a bumbuckler sound, dog.
And inhabited by poorer Jamaican residents, though yard can also refer to home or turf in general in Jamaican patois. Outside of Jamaica, yardies is often used to refer to Jamaican gangs or organised crime groups and gangsters of Jamaican origin, nationality or ethnicity. In this sense, the term is sometimes used interchangeably with the term posse or Jamaican posse to refer to crime groups of Jamaican origin, with the term posse used more frequently in North America and yardies being more frequently used in the United Kingdom. Yardie gangs or Jamaican posses are involved in a wide array of criminal activities depending on their location, ranging from political corruption, political violence and assassination in Jamaica to drug trafficking and gang violence in the US, Canada and UK. Derived from Jamaican patois, the term Yardie can be ambiguous, having multiple meanings depending on the context. In the most innocuous sense, Yardie can simply refer to a Jamaican national, as yard can mean home in Jamaican patois. Jamaican expatriates who moved abroad to countries such as the UK and the US would often refer to themselves and other Jamaicans as Yardies. Yardie may also more specifically apply to those Jamaicans originating in the impoverished government yards or courtyards of Jamaican public housing, and the term was eventually applied to criminals and gang members originating from these yards. As the term yard in Jamaican patois can also refer to a territory, turf or a piece of land, Yardie further gained gang or criminal connotations as Jamaican gangs or criminals claimed certain territories or turf and referred to such territory as their yards. Subsequently, in the UK and to a lesser extent North America, the term Yardie most frequently refers to gangsters or gangs of Jamaican origin, though these gang members themselves may refer to their gangs as posses or crews. The term is especially common in the UK to describe Jamaican or British Jamaican organised crime groups and gangs, while posse has become the more common term in North America. In the 1950s, in Trenchtown, Kingston, Jamaica, the government created social housing developments employing large public courtyards, and the courtyard areas soon became the hub of a social and recreational activity in the crowded housing of Trenchtown. With increasing overcrowding and poverty, however, squatting and homelessness developed within the yards. Crime, drug abuse and violence overran the yards, while political corruption and clientelism led to local politicians buying and selling patronage within the community and paying gangs and violent political supporters to intimidate voters, threaten, assault and kill political opponents. By the 1970s and 1980s, political violence and political affiliated organised crime groups and street gangs became increasingly common in poorer areas of Jamaica, with gangs often led by older bosses known as Dons, which was in reference to the Sicilian Mafia Don, and participating in apolitical drug trafficking and racketeering in addition to political violence and political intimidation. These gangs became known as Yardies, posses or crews. Accounts of association between Jamaican political factions and the rise of Yardies are given in the factual books Ruthless by Jeff Small and Born for Dead by Laurie Gunst. By the 1980s, a drop in government budgets resulted in less money being paid to political parties to their gangs of armed supporters. Those political yard gangs thus increasingly turned to criminal activity, such as drug trafficking, to bring an income. At the same time, the Jamaican government severely cracked down on Yardie gangs and political violence in general, leading many so-called Yardie gangsters to immigrate abroad and establish gangs in the UK, US and Canada. These establishments of Yardie gangs abroad coincide with the rise of crack cocaine in both North America and the UK, and Yardie and posse gangs from Jamaica became heavily involved in the trafficking of crack cocaine and other drugs, in addition to illegal gambling and other criminal activities. During the 1950s, the British government encouraged immigration to the country to fill existing job vacancies. Within the Caribbean community, new arrivals from Jamaica were sometimes referred to as Yardies, due to the reference of Jamaica as backyard or back home. A large influx of inner city Jamaican immigration to Britain during the 1980s led to a rise of gang violence or behaviour on the part of the Jamaicans, which became known in wider British society as Yardie culture, and the participants, Yardies. The terms Yardie gang or Yardie gun violence were largely used by British media to describe violent crimes in London's black community. The gangs in London are specifically known to have occupied and operated in Brixton, Harlesden, Stonebridge, Hackney, Tottenham, Peckham and Notting Hill. Yardie activity has been reported in Aberdeen and South Wales. British-born writer Victor Headley wrote a best-selling 1992 novel entitled Yardie. In 2018, British actor Idris Elba made his directorial debut with his feature film Yardie, based on Mr. Headley's book. Yardie gangs are notorious for their involvement in gun crime and the illegal drug trade, notably marijuana and crack cocaine in the United Kingdom. In 1993, Yardies were blamed for the murder of a police constable, Patrick Dunn, shot dead while patrolling in Clapham. If you'd like to know more about that, we have a documentary on what happened, so give it a watch if you get time. In 2006, Rohan Chung, described as a Jamaican yard gangster, was given 3 life sentences for the murder of Noel Patterson and his daughters, Connie and Lorna Morrison. British police are hesitant to categorise British Yardie gangs as organised crime, since there appears to be no real structure or central leadership. Affiliations between the Yardie gangs in the UK can be described as loose at best. Academics have noted a tendency to over-label black British crime as Yardie, related due to stereotype and social narrative. A number of operations to combat Yardie gun crime have been set up, notably Operation Trident in the London area. Yardies, or imitating gangs, also appeared to be active in Bristol, Birmingham, Aberdeen, Edinburgh and Nottingham, but to a lesser extent. If you'd like to know more about the Yardie gangs in Nottingham, we have a documentary, so give it a watch when you get time. Some maintain that the supposed reach and influence in communities of these Yardies is a myth. The story of UK...
That's one thing I saw as well, bro. You can't brush past my spliff and my head. Well, obviously
and
my
influence
head.
in communities.
Brother, this is way too close, bro. Like, bro, walk around or something, dog. You can't get, you're too close right there, so brethren. Back up.
Of these Yardies is a myth. The story of UK Yardies is a complex narrative that intersects the immigration policies and UK police strategies. A significant number of Jamaican immigrants, some of whom had ties to criminal organisations in Jamaica, found their way into the United Kingdom. The immigration landscape during that time was marked by a variety of factors, including the Windrush generation and the subsequent waves of immigration from the Caribbean. Some Jamaican individuals with connection to criminal activities may have entered the UK, and in certain cases, UK police force agencies engaged in unconventional strategies. There were instances where individuals with a background in Jamaican criminal organisations were allowed into the country with the understanding that they would cooperate with law enforcement as informants. This approach was often part of a broader effort to gather intelligence on criminal networks and activities. These arrangements, however, were not without controversy. Critics argue that such tactics could potentially compromise the integrity of the immigration process and raise ethical questions about collaborating with individuals involved in such illegal activities. Balance between national security concerns and ethical considerations in UK police practices still remains a topic of debate. And to make matters worse, the Yardies who had agreed to become informants came to the country and created a criminal rampage which changed the criminal landscape within the UK forever. In exploring the narrative of UK Yardies, it becomes essential to dissect the multifaceted aspects of immigration policies, law enforcement strategies, and the socio-economic context that contributed to the presence of individuals with Jamaican criminal ties in the United Kingdom. The story unfolds against a backdrop of complex and interconnected factors that shape the dynamics of immigration and crime in the UK.
When they screwed up was a guy called Delroy Denton, who was a Yardie.
What a Jamaican name, by the way.
Over in the 80s and started what they call the crack wars.
What a Jamaican name, by the way. Delroy Denton is the Jamaican of Jamaican names, bro.
Very interesting with the crack wars because they're all political. That was all down to a guy called Ciagas, who was the head of the JLP in Jamaica, political party. And it was all funded. I mean, and a lot of these Yardies were soldiers. They were proper soldiers and went on to become government hitmen. And they came over here to sell crack to raise funds for the JLP. And Ciagas, he was a white guy that was politically had a lot of clout in Jamaica. And so it was honestly... There's a book I think called Crack Wars. It's fantastic, and there's a guy called Victor Headley, who's an author, and he writes. There's a film called Yardie and Yush. They're brilliant, and they go on about the political motivation behind the early. Now it's just chaos, but back then it had anyway. So there was one guy, a Jamaican guy called Delroy Denton, and he actually murders someone, but he's got all this top-notch information. So the police decide to ignore it and run him as an informant.
Why they never walk
He's a hitman. He's like a JLP sponsored hitman. And he's just given up minor level drug dealers so he can make more money. So he's actually manipulated them. And it caused huge embarrassment. The whole thing collapsed. And there's another guy called Bertie Smalls, which is a quite well-known informant. Bertie Smalls, that's why grasses get called Bertie Smalls. So when you look at that, it becomes the tail wagging the dog. And some of these people, they're clever, they're very manipulative. You know, they know how to, especially if you've got quite a weak-minded couple, you've got an ego-driven couple, you've got a couple likes a little bit of Charlie, and so it's a little bit there for you, mate. No worries. But it's all seen and noted. And it will all be used, and it has been used many, many times.
When they moved into London with their guns and their drugs, Scotland Yard grasped one of the most dangerous weapons in their armoury. They used murderous gangsters as informants. Tonight, Animal Ocean uncovers the hidden story of a secret police operation which set out to defend the law and ended up by bending it.
Breaking it. Horrible.
This is the story of a war fought out on the streets of our cities. It is a story about the vicious Yardie criminals who deal crack and murder on our streets, and about the informants the police use to catch them. It is a story in which a multiple murderer escaped prosecution, and in which a lethally dangerous gunman was allowed to stay illegally in this country where he raped and murdered.
Yeah, that R word don't sit right, bro.
Above all, it is a story about the line between right and wrong, and about the disastrous results of law officers straying across it. The story begins in the late 1980s, when Scotland Yard realised that they were facing a new threat. Jamaican gangsters known as Yardies were moving into London, pumping huge quantities of crack cocaine onto the streets and using violence in a routine, almost casual way, shooting and kidnapping and torturing those who stood in their way. And unlike the more familiar mafias, the Yardies had no formal structure, which made it much more difficult to find out what they were doing. It was a new problem, but Scotland Yard fell back on an old solution: informers.
Informer, tell me why you do it.
The first wave of officers who confronted the Yardies understood the dangers of trying to use them as informers.
Well, it's necessary to use informants to deal with most kinds of crime, and it always has been so. I mean, informants go back thousands of years, I guess.
Thousands of years, I guess. Ah.
Former Superintendent John Jones won a reputation in the 1980s as one of the Met's best Yardie hunters.
He's a Yardie hunter.
Used by the police.
I don't like that.
Of crime.
As a yard man, me not like that. Me not like to feel like some man just a walk around saying him a hunt Yardie. Me not like that.
In the case of the Jamaicans, the Jamaican criminals that is, they are from a different culture by and large from the culture which we live in here. And therefore it's much more difficult for
come from Huntsville?
To infiltrate in a more general way the community which they hide amongst.
The people that you're trying to catch
come from Huntsville?
Sometimes the people and the methods indeed that you have to use to catch them are nasty.
As head of serious crime in Nottingham, Peter Coles knew at first hand the dirty world of the informant.
It should always be the police who are in control of the informant. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for the informant to actually be in control of the police officer.
What?
The use of informants to fight the violence of the Yardie gangs may have been understandable, but a number of episodes over the last 3 years suggest that Scotland Yard's informant-based anti-Yardie operation has been seriously and repeatedly compromised.
Like anti-Yardie.
At the centre of this story of chaos were two men who had never been trained for this work and who were allowed to operate with the minimum of supervision.
None
One
whatsoever.
was an immigration officer, Brian Fotheringham.
Minimum supervision. You watch a man for it,
Fotheringham had no specialised training and few resources.
Cranium!
The other was an ordinary police constable named Steve Barker, who'd been pounding the beat in South London.
Oh, yo, I thought he was going to say something else.
Barker had stumbled into the war against the Yardies when he persuaded one key man to become his informer. Suddenly, he was moved to the front line, to Scotland Yard's intelligence department, SO11.
Just offer one
Barker
request.
and Fotheringham fought the Yardies on the streets of London. They sorted out the moral and legal tangles as they went along. Trouble was not far away.
Of course not. With the Yardie, them trouble out.
One of
trouble
P.C. Barker's informants was Delroy Denton, known on the streets as Epsy.
No trouble,
Denton arrived in this country illegally in 1993 and was recruited as an informant after being arrested in a raid on a Brixton pub. He worked for Scotland Yard for 2 years, providing information on other Jamaican criminals. But after 2 years, Denton was jailed for life for the murder of 24-year-old Marcia Laws.
Yeah, I don't like this part.
Marcia's sister Mercy is now looking after her 2 young children, Cassius and Malika.
They're babies still. Cassius is 3.5, Malika's 27 months. And so they don't really know too much about Marcia, but you know, they know her. Through talking about her, showing them pictures, things like that. And with all this happening, Cassius is picked up on certain things, and he's realised that, you know, something's happened to his mum. The other day, he asked me, you know, why has she gone to heaven? And I said, oh, because she just died. And he said, no, the man beat her up.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think we all feel really very angry because we know it shouldn't have happened in the first place. We know that it shouldn't have been in the country. It just shouldn't have happened in the first place. You know, obviously we're really angry because it could have been prevented.
Denton's information may have been valuable in the fight against the Yardies, but giving him his freedom as an informer had a terrible price. What sort of a man was this? Law enforcement officials relied on him for information, yet he could murder the mother of 2 small children.
Like, what information is he giving you that's worth this?
Down at Central Police Station in Kingston, Jamaica, Delroy Denton is well known. Two officers from the Jamaican Constabulary dug out his criminal file from their records department.
I know him as a gunman. I know him as a hardened gunman.
Yo.
And he's very witty. Very witty. He's what I will call a silent killer. He will creep upon you at any moment, kill you, and no one knows.
Yo.
When we told Sergeant Thompson that Scotland Yard had recruited Denton as an informer, he stressed the need for Denton's handlers to control him.
It will be very important because, as I said before, he has a wide knowledge of what is going on. And but he's a person you cannot take him too lightly.
Don't take it too
You
see.
will have to have somebody
Him
else
said.
keeping an eye on him.
In May 1994, in London, Brian Fotheringham found himself sitting across the interview table from Delroy Denton, who had been arrested with a knife in a drugs raid on a Brixton pub. Brian Fotheringham knew a lot about his interviewee from police intelligence files.
Let's get to snitching. No, not me, him.
The illegal immigrant was a founder of a Jamaican Yardie posse and had fought in street wars there. His record in Kingston included a 16-year sentence for firearms offences and armed robbery. Denton was a very dangerous individual, Fotheringham noted on the file, and he underlined the word very.
Very dangerous individual.
He filled in another document, an exceptional risk form.
What's that? I mean, okay, it's like self-explanatory.
This was to alert Scotland Yard to the presence of this dangerous man. It described him as being of an extremely violent nature. Fotheringham considered Denton so dangerous that when the Jamaican applied for political asylum here, Fotheringham was certain that he should stay behind bars while the application was handled. Long-term detention was required.
Long-term detention.
Then an odd thing happened.
That's what, like,
Brian
some we used to
Fotheringham
get
had
in
a
high school.
conversation with Constable Steve Barker from the Yardie unit at SO11. And Fotheringham changed his mind. Denton no longer seemed to be dangerous. Fotheringham noted, PC Barker has stated intelligence has shown the subject has not been involved in any serious criminal matters since being here.
You can't know that though.
After consulting a more senior immigration officer, Fotheringham concluded there was no realistic chance of
order from
detaining
above.
Denton for long. Denton could be released after all, while his asylum claim was handled. But there was one thing Brian Fotheringham did not record in his notes.
That day,
Delroy Denton had agreed to work as an informer, both for Fotheringham and for Steve Barker. And that night, this very dangerous individual was allowed to walk out of custody and back onto the streets of London.
Some of Denton's closest associates were none too pleased to see him. They knew he was deeply disturbed. They had heard him boasting about the girl he had throttled in a phone box.
Imagine somebody,
another woman whose throat
imagine someone describes you as deeply disturbed.
He had cut, and now he was free again.
A lot of the sort of police officers who
about killing a woman,
identify themselves as being good at handling informants tend to be fairly young and inexperienced because they're full of enthusiasm. They're actually out on the street. They're dealing with the sorts of crimes which lead them to be able to build up a bank, if you like, of informants. But they haven't necessarily got the kind of wisdom which is very, very vital in one's dealings with an informant. They probably don't always understand as they should how dangerous these people are. And sometimes the vision of what they may obtain from the informant blinds them to the dangers which they're putting themselves and sometimes other people in.
7 months after Denton was released, the mother of a 15-year-old convent schoolgirl called the local police to say that her daughter had been raped. The girl described how she and 3 friends had got to know a man they sometimes saw on their way home from school.
First red flag. Stranger danger. You don't get to know no man on your way home from school, little girl. What is wrong with you? First red flag.
That day they had skipped school and gone round to his flat.
Second and third red flag in one sentence. Skipping school and then going to a man's flat at 15 years old. Third red flag.
He had behaved in such a crazy way that they'd called him Screw Loose.
Fourth red flag, probably the biggest of all. Cause maybe, alright, cool, maybe he was cool before, but if you have to call him Screw Loose because of how wild he acts, you should not be around this guy. Fourth red flag.
They drank some wine and smoked a joint, and she...
Fifth, see, you know, I'm not going to keep counting, you know. This is just a whole shit show.
...had fallen asleep.
No.
Her friends had left, and she'd woken up to find the man forcing himself upon her.
Oh my God.
His name was Delroy Denton. Denton was arrested and remanded in custody, though he denied the rape, saying the girl had consented.
She was asleep, you creep.
The girl herself was admitted to hospital on the day after the rape, having taken an overdose of sleeping pills. 2 months later, the Crown Prosecution Service dropped the charges against Denton on the grounds of insufficient evidence. But still time, perhaps, to revisit Fotheringham's original view of Denton as very dangerous.
That's wild, bro. That's insane.
We've discovered that 5 months earlier, the Jamaican's asylum application had been refused.
So am I to get out of there? Get out of there.
For Delroy Denton, deportation could not be far away. But then, an unfortunate thing happened.
An unfortunate thing.
Denton's immigration file had been marked for dispatch to Fotheringham for a final round of inquiries, and it had disappeared. Denton was back on the streets of London. By April 1995, deportation was on no one's agenda. Denton was still reporting to Fotheringham's office and still working for Scotland Yard. And 24-year-old Marcia Laws, the mother of 2 small children, went missing.
This is just sad. That's this, yeah.
I was sort of preparing myself for something. I sort of, you know, shipped my little boy off to a friend's house for the weekend, phoned up another friend to say, look, this something's happened to Marcia. Whatever happens, we're going to phone the police or kick the door down because the house was just dark all the time.
There'll be a sister. Good sister. That's a good sister.
No one's seen her type of thing. And then just getting into the house, seeing her there, you know, obviously I did scream a little bit and then sort of just stopped.
Yeah, everybody would.
I remember wanting the ambulance to hurry up, even knowing that she was dead. I just wanted them to hurry up to take her out of there. It was horrible that she's been there for, you know, God knows how many days.
Denton was arrested and charged, but after 4 months in custody, the Crown Prosecution Service decided there was insufficient evidence to gain a conviction. They dropped the case. It was a decision that incensed the local murder squad. They knew Denton was an illegal immigrant and that his claim to asylum had been refused at the Home Office. So they asked Brian Fotheringham to detain him. Fotheringham refused. Denton was released onto the street again, and Fotheringham and Scotland Yard continued to use him as an informant. The murder squad investigating Marcia's murder knew Denton was their man, and they reactivated the case.
Good.
They found more evidence, rearrested Denton, and charged him again with the murder of Marcia Laws.
Good.
In July last year, Delroy Denton was jailed for life. Fotheringham has been questioned by his bosses about the decision to release Denton and how the Immigration Service could have failed to serve the papers that could have saved 2 women from his violence.
That.
Fotheringham insisted the file had been lost.
Shut up.
We spoke to David Burrell, former inspector with the Immigration Service's Law Enforcement Unit, about the legal position.
Mr. Burrell, once an asylum application letter has been written and an application rejected, how common would it be for that letter to sit around at immigration for a period of months?
Most uncommon.
Most uncommon. Almost unheard of.
So how concerned would you have been at such a failure, such a delay?
Extremely concerned.
Extremely concerned.
Once received, the immigration officers are under a duty to make arrangements for that person's removal from the country.
Brian Fotheringham denies that he has ever helped a Yardie informer to stay illegally in the UK.
Of course,
but a man who has worked closely with him has told us that such arrangements can be made.
Of course.
Every arrangement can be made. Cooperation between the police and the Immigration Service. That's the kind of understanding you get when people work closely together. We relied on the police for our existence. We want the police to make our arrests. We want police cells to hold people in custody. We need police interview rooms. In return, there are certain things that go on. Well, one way of helping the police was you could ignore a situation. You could sit on a file and turn a blind eye. Agreements were made that a file would remain halfway down the pipeline. It was all based on trust.
I have no doubt that from time to time arrangements are made unofficially to allow his detention by the Immigration Service to be delayed for a little while. And speaking pragmatically, and as an ex-police officer rather than as an current one, I see nothing wrong with that idea, provided it's carried out in a responsible way.
You get a broken nose.
There have been wider problems with Scotland Yard's Yardie operation. 3 times in 4 years, separate squads were set up, and 3 times in 4 years, the squads were shut down before they could finish the job. One Jamaican killer was imported into the UK, given a luxury flat and car, and entertained by officers at the local golf range. The cost, about £30,000. The return, according to a senior source...
I feel like the low-key just brought them over here to study them and see how they operate, bro. I feel like that's what it is, bro.
Not a single arrest.
Not a single arrest. Hey, you brought him here to watch him.
Another Yardie informant came in on a 6-month visa and stayed for 10 years. He was eventually jailed for armed robbery. And then there was the case of Eton Green. Green was Constable Barker's other star informant.
Is that do-rag that?
In 1993, while working for Scotland Yard, Green was arrested by the Nottingham police for leading a massive robbery on a blues party held in this warehouse on the outskirts of the city. For a time, Peter Coles was in charge of the investigation.
During the early hours, a gang of men came in. They announced that they was, believe it was the Seek and Destroy posse. fired some
SAD,
shots.
search and destroy, seek and destroy. What them I do?
And proceeded to rob most of the people present of money, watches, rings, etc.
When them just do a clean sweep of the room.
Actually got robbed at gunpoint and were terrified by it.
Detectives had asked for Scotland Yard's help in arresting Green. Steve Barker, his handler, had met with Green and allowed him to walk away.
Allowed him to walk away.
And then, in violation of Home Office rules, Scotland Yard's officers had misled the court about Green's role as an informant. In his summing up, Mr. Justice Smedley reserved his harshest words for Scotland Yard.
I am very disturbed at the way in which those responsible for handling Mr. Green appear not only to have failed to cooperate, but possibly to have impeded Nottingham's inquiries.
I think the general feeling left was that they had been obstructed in a way that they didn't expect fellow police officers to obstruct them. I think the officers that were actually hands-on by the time of the trial would agree with that sentiment.
The story gets stranger. Shortly after his conviction, Green was taken out of prison to a Metropolitan Police safe house. There, he agreed to become a supergrass.
Like him a transform.
Confession of his life of crime. In the process, Green admitted to committing 11 murders in Jamaica.
That's a serial killer, you know. But there's way more down here.
He also described a series of violent crimes carried out in London while he was being paid as an informer. The way that Green's extraordinary confession has been handled raises serious questions about Scotland Yard's anti-Yardie operation.
Serious questions.
To start with, Scotland Yard have never told the Jamaican police. Nor has Green been prosecuted for the violent crimes he admitted in London.
So what's the point of all of this?
In the debriefing, quite deliberately, he was never cautioned because they feared he'd clam up. His admissions could not be used against him. Scotland Yard simply kept the confessions of a multiple killer and armed robber to themselves.
It is very, very surprising to me as a police officer because it is a fundamental rule of policing. It's not something that, you know, it's not a clever rule. It's one of the very, very first things that you are taught, that a person who is suspected of committing an offence, or indeed in this case is admitting an offence, has to be cautioned. It's just not something, it is second nature to any policeman.
If he suddenly comes out with stuff they don't expect, particularly about serious crime like that, well, you know, you've just got no option. You may not want to do it because it might stop him talking, but you have to do it.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, if they caution him, be like, hey, bro, I know you're going to tell me how you killed 11 people, but remember, some of this information can be used against you in court. He's literally going to shut up. So there's like two sides of that sword right there. But everything else, yeah, foolishness.
Despite Green's confessions to murder and random violence, Scotland Yard now set about easing his way back onto the streets of London. They sent a report to the parole board outlining his value as an informant, and they approached the Home Office to try to stop him being deported. But would he carry on robbing and shooting as he had done in his previous career as an informer? There seemed no way of knowing, although a parole assessment report suggested Green should take part in anger management sessions after his release.
That can't help him, that can't save him. May I tell you that?
Nobody knows how many Yardies have been allowed into the country by Scotland Yard, nor how many crimes they have gone on to commit.
Thousands.
It's clear that rules have been broken and laws have been bent in an operation whose senior management appears to have been in a state of some confusion. Neither Scotland Yard nor the Immigration Department are willing to discuss what they've done. The
of course not.
Have been left alone, without any explanation, trying to come to terms with what's happened to them.
And that sister and everybody, and look. Oh man, that's so. And then the piano at the end, the organ at the end. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, just, you know, when you see the kids, yeah, man, them draw for the heart. Them draw for the heartstring right there, so brother, may I tell you, man. And them catch it, may I tell you, man. But yo, crazy story. While, like, I haven't heard anything like this in a long time. Like, I did not expect this. I thought the meat, the nitty gritty of this video would have been the information that he's giving them. But the whole point of the video is they're not giving them any information, but they're still allowed to just run around and commit crimes. Which is, yeah, I couldn't fathom this. So, I like this video. Love this video. Let me know if you like it. Yo, if you made it to the end of this video, can you like the video, please? Please, I know I had to react to it, but technical difficulties, sometimes it happens, sometimes it don't, but we're here, we're live. Yeah, we're alive, yeah? So please, subscribe as well. Hit the like button, jump into the comments, share it with somebody if you can, and subscribe. Subscribe to me. Don't worry, I'm just a wake up, so don't worry about that, man. Subscribe, go to see about. Peace.